Habayim to be able to come together from around the world. I really want to thank Me'umke Delibi from the bottom of my heart, Rabbi Taragin. It's such a tremendous service and ability, a koyach that he has to be able to help unite Klal Yisroel. It happened, I believe, before SHUVU twice, once that I was able to participate on. I believe there was an additional one as well. And now a third time is Baruch Hashem, a chazaka. What bigger bracha can we around the world give Rabbi Taragin than you and your family should be zeicha to continue having the gesund, the koyach, the seichel, the wisdom, to be mamshech your avodas hakodesh. Hashem gave you many, many koychos and many talents, but certainly over the last number of months, first and foremost has been this uncanny ability of yours to unite Klal Yisroel through limud haTorah. May the Ribbono Shel Olam indeed shine all of his brachos upon us, seeing how we are uniting, and now just a few days before Tisha B'Av, and indeed be zeicha, this Tisha B'Av already, Korah Lai Mayid in the present tense, that it be a Yom Tiv. So I, on behalf of all those who are listening, to you, Rabbi Taragin, we give our greatest, deepest yashakayach, ein milim befila habia rikshe levavi. One of the most powerful and stirring kinais that we say the morning of Tisha B'Av is about the two children of the great Kohen Gadol, Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, his son and his daughter. And of course, we know that it's based on a famous Gemara in Gittin, where the Gemara in Gittin tells us in great detail how the son and the daughter on separate occasion were each taken captive by a group of people. And each group did not know about the other, that one took the son and one took the daughter. One just knew that they took a very, very handsome young man, and the other knew that they took a beautiful young girl, and each one was taken captive. They met up, and as the Gemara in Gittin tells us in great detail, they decided amongst themselves, let us go ahead and put them in a large warehouse, if you will, a dark room at night. And we will tell them, the boy and the girl, that they have to be with each other. And as a result, since he is so handsome and she is so beautiful, as a result of their being together, there will be children, and then there will be slaves from the children, beautiful and handsome. And they were just envisioning how many slaves, beautiful and handsome, they would be able to get from the young man and young woman being together. And that was their plan. And of course, we know the Gemara in Gittin tells us that each one was told the plan of those who took them captive, the son in one corner, the daughter in the other. Obviously, they didn't know who the other was. And that night, the son was crying upon the plan that he was asked to do. How could it be that someone who is descending from Aaron Kohen Gadol, he is going to have to be with someone who is a shivcha? That's the way he referred to the other. And she, crying in her corner, crying and bemoaning her fate, descending from Miriam, having to be with someone who is an Eved. In other words, he referred to the one on the other end of the room as a shivcha, and she referred to the one on the other end of the room as an Eved. And of course, we know the Gemara tells us that they were not with each other, obviously. And then as the rays started to shine in on the room, they started to run towards each other. He realized at that moment, with the rays of sun coming in, that it was his sister. She realized that it was her brother. And the Gemara tells us, upon that realization, they hugged, they cried, ad sheyotza nishmasam, until their souls departed, and the son and the daughter, Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, passed away. Al eile ani boichia, eini yardamayim, how we can't stop crying over what happened. The Ben Yehoyada asks the obvious question. Once the rays of sun began shining in the morning, and they realized who the other was, that he realized it was his sister, and she realized it was her brother, and therefore, obviously, they weren't going to go ahead with the plan of being with each other. Upon that simcha gedayla, that unfathomable joy that they must have been having, why is it when they realized who the other was and they were siblings, when they cried, it should have been tears of joy? Why did they cry until their souls departed? Take a look at the Ben Yehoyada on the Gemara and Gittin. He tells us something so powerful, and this is what it means, darkness, and how to remove it. As they came towards each other and they realized who the other was, he was crying because he said in middle of the night, I referred to my sister as a shivcha. How could I have said about my sister she's a shivcha? And she, upon realizing that it was her brother, was so broken. How could I have referred to my brother as an eved? Granted, it should be noted that when they called each other by that name, he didn't know it was his sister and she didn't know it was her brother. And yet, upon the realization it was a brother and a sister, they were so broken, so broken. How did I call her a shivcha? How did I call her an eved? So broken were they that they cried, Ad sheyotza nishmosam al eila ani boichia. And we have to take out from that very powerful pshat of the Ben Yehoyada, all of Klal Yisrael, Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, as is evident from our uniting around the world today. We are brothers and we are sisters. And what is it? How are we referring? They were so broken that one called the other an eved, and he called her a shivcha. And perhaps we say words that are even more painful, more damaging, more irreparable. Are we broken? Let us learn from this kinna, from the children of the Tana of the Kohen Gadol, Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. They were so broken. We should be crying when we call our brothers and our sisters. How do we refer to them? What are we saying? Are we using words that are damaging, disparaging, irreparable? That's a life of darkness. And we're still crying because such is the power when a person says that which they shouldn't. In fact, take a look. We know measure for measure, a person speaks lashon hara. He has the negav tzairas, so we bring him over to the kohen, and the kohen will look and say tameh or tahar. How is that punishment measure for speaking lashon hara? Open your hearts around the world to such a powerful, poignant explanation. Because that person who has that negav tzairas that came from lashon hara, if you would ask that person, do you know the kohen that's about to render your decision? He would say, no, I don't. Do you realize that your entire future and fate lies in the balance of one word? He's going to say tahar or tameh. If he says tahar, you could remain. If he says tameh, we know all the difficulties that you'll have impending. Your entire future and fate lies in the balance of one word. To the person who speaks lashon hara, they might think it's just one word. I was kidding. It's not a big deal. I didn't mean it. Don't be so sensitive. Measure for measure, you who did not believe in the power of just one word. Your entire future and fate lies in the balance of one word. Tahar or tameh. Do you still not believe in the koyach of just one word? We have to learn from that kinna that I expressed, that we mentioned about Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha's son and daughter, and when they called Eved and Shivcha, they didn't even know it was a brother and sister. Alachas kama v'kama, please forgive me for saying, but to people that we do know and we should know better, Achenu Kol Beis Yisroel, how are we referring to them? What are we saying? Are we saying words that are irreparable, damaging, disparaging? Words that are destructive? Our words have to be words that soothe and comfort and warm. We know, and we've said many times, and hence the title today, Removing the Darkness, of the 10 Makkos, putting aside Makkas B'chayros, which is in a league by itself, but of the first 9, which one is the most funereal? Which one of the 9 is considered the worst? Chazal tell us it was Choshech. Why? Why is Choshech considered the worst of all of the 9 Makkos? In Choshech, the Egyptians didn't lose the most human and animal life. So why, pray tell, is the most funereal considered Choshech? The great Maggid Reb Shapiro Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh Levracha used to say in his inimitable style, you're right that in the earlier Makkos they lost more human and animal life. That's true. But the Pasuk tells us by Choshech, it was such a thick, intense darkness. They couldn't get out of their places. They couldn't see each other. They couldn't be there one for the other. Says Reb Shapiro in the earlier Makkos, in quantity and quality, the losses to human and animal life was greater. But at least in those plagues, in those Makkos, they had each other. They had a shoulder to cry on. They had somebody to wipe away a tear. They had somebody to listen to them and mend a broken heart. But in Choshech, they were alone. And the most miserable feeling in the world is when a person is made to feel alone. We're not only talking about people who are alone, we're talking about people who are made to feel alone. Nobody is there for them to wipe away a tear. Nobody is there to listen to their tzaras. Nobody has time for them. People will mention to their leaders, to their rabbanim, to their Rosh HaYeshiva, there are many vicissitudes and challenges and trials and tribulations in life that I can handle, but I cannot handle being made to feel alone. And that's why, says Reb Shapiro, Choshech, although the losses in human and animal life were not as great, but they were alone. And there's no feeling in the world more miserable than being made to feel alone. That is darkness. And so when Rabbi Taragin was kind enough to call me again to speak just a few days before Tisha B'Av 5780, I asked him if he could please make the topic and the title, Remove the Darkness, Remove the Choshech. How many people do we know in general and from the last 4 or 5 months with COVID-19 who feel alone, who are alone, who are made to feel, where can they turn? We have to remove the darkness. We have to replace it with the light that will be Eirei Shel Mashiach and bring the Beis HaMikdash. We have to remember from the kin of the children of Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, what is it that causes us pain? What is it that breaks us? How do we refer to a fellow brother and a sister, someone in G'dolai Yisroel? You don't think that one word was such a big deal? You don't think I spent my night crying, I wet my pillow? You don't think I had feelings of, is anybody listening? The power of one word, one phone call, one resolve, one I'm sorry, one let's try again. We have to work on removing the darkness. Choshech, when people are alone or are made to feel alone, is darkness. It is Choshech. There's a very powerful story that's said over with one of the Vishnitzer Rebbes now in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yisrael of Vishnitz, that a few years ago, one of the Hasidim, not particularly one of his, not somebody that was necessarily his chassid, meaning a Vishnitzer chassid, but somebody who was making a chasana, his first chasana the next night, a young man, he came to the Rebbe for a bracha and he said it's a bittersweet simcha because his young wife just passed away and he was making the chasana himself. And so he asked the Vishnitzer Rebbe for a bracha. Bittersweet. His wife wasn't there, making his first chasna, his oldest child. The next night, of course, the Rebbe gave him a warm and heartsige bracha. The next night at about 3 a.m. after the chasna, after the mitzvah tans, when this man who just made his first chasna was about to go in, there was a knock on the door. He opened it up, and much to his surprise, the great Vishnitzer Rebbe Rav Yisroel of B'nai Brak was standing there with his gabbai. He asked to come in, and he schmoozed for the better part of an hour with the man at his table, asking him questions. Tell me how many people showed up and how many didn't show up. How did the shoes that you bought your children fit for dancing? What were the dishes that were served at the chassan's tish? Did the second dance start on time? Did the sorbet melt? How many people chose chicken for the main dish and how many chose fish? And after this type of conversation for an hour, he excused himself and he got up to leave. And at that point, when they were outside, the gabbai turned to the Vishnitzer Rebbe and said, please forgive me for asking. Why did we come to this man's house at 3, 4 in the morning and discuss shoes and place cards and chicken and fish and sorbet? And the Rebbe looked at the man and said, tell me, when a person comes home from making a simcha 2 in the morning, what's the first thing they do? They turn to their spouse, and over a glass of hot tea, they discuss all the pitchifkas, all the nuances, every small detail of the simcha. Who was this man going to talk to? Who was this man going to turn and discuss the simcha with? He was alone. It was chayshech. So yes, I came at 3, 4 in the morning to talk about chicken and sorbet and fish and shoes and place cards and dancing, to remove the chayshech. A few days before Tisha B'Av 5780, we have to remove the chayshech. We have to use the words, not words that are disparaging and damaging and destructive and irreparable. Words that build, words that encourage, words that are positive, words that are saturated with love. That's what the Vishnitzer Rebbe did. And that's what it means to remove the darkness. A number of years ago, I was speaking about this topic, removing the darkness, showing a person that you're there for them, how our great tzadikim seem to always have that ability. And a doctor from the tri-state area came over to me and said, I want to tell you a story. It was about his elderly mother. And he told me this story that his elderly mother on Erev Pesach would call the Gadol Ador, the Pesach Ador of Moshe Feinstein, and ask if the medicine she took for her heart condition she was allowed to take, or whether or not it contained chametz. And Rav Moshe, with the patience, gently reassured her she could take the medicine for her heart. He explained why it wasn't an issue, why she should take it, and he vinched her on a gut yor and a kosher Pesach. The son, the doctor, told me my mother called Rav Moshe Erev Pesach for more than 20 years. Every single year, Erev Pesach, Erev Pesach, Erev Pesach, for more than 20 years, she called Rav Moshe with the same shaila. He told me that after 20 plus years, 1 year on Erev Pesach, the mother was a bit forgetful and she forgot to call Rav Moshe. Erev Pesach, a few hours before Yom Tov, the phone rang in the woman's home. She picked it up, and the voice on the other end introduced himself as Moshe Feinstein. It was Rav Moshe, and he went on to say, I didn't hear from you. It's Erev Pesach. I was so worried and concerned. Are you okay? Do you feel all right? When I didn't hear from you on Erev Pesach, I was so worried. Only after she reassured Rav Moshe she was okay did he remind her that she could take the medicine. It's not an issue, Erev Pesach. She could take it on Yom Tov, and he vinched her on a gut yor. Do we fathom that story? We know Erev Pesach is the busiest day of the year. Reb Moshe, the busiest person in the world, and what was on his mind? Remove chayshech, remove darkness, make the phone call. And that is our charge a few days before Tisha B'Av 5780. What are we doing to remove the darkness? What are we doing to make that call? Say the word, make the resolve, wipe away someone's tear, mend a broken heart, say I'm sorry, let the person know that you care about them. Remove the darkness. Because if there's no feeling in the world as miserable as choshech, then one of the greatest feelings in the world is removing the feelings of loneliness and letting the person know, I'm there for you and I care about you. This is about removing choshech. It's about realizing, which is what Rabbi Taragin accomplished by uniting us around the world. Achenu kol Beis Yisrael. What are the words, the speech, the actions and interactions that we're sharing with each other? Al eile ani boichia, eini yardamayim. It has to be words that soothe and help and love and comfort. Rabbi, I want to end with a very, very powerful Chsam Sofer. The Chsam Sofer is a Chusa Yagan Aleinu wonders. We know that the Gemara tells us that the Beis Hamikdash, Yerushalayim, was destroyed because when we interacted with people, we interacted with din. Din meaning we went according to the letter of the law. We did a wonderful job the way we should, but it was din. It wasn't lifnim nishuras hadin, above and beyond. Azay zok the Gemara, that's why Yerushalayim was chara, because we dealt with people with din beautifully and wonderfully, but not lifnim nishuras hadin, above and beyond. The Chsam Sofer is a Chusa Yagan Aleinu wonders. We know that the Gemara Yud Gimel and Megillah tells us that when Haman was so excited because the month that the lot fell out, Lahashmid Laharug La'abid Es Kol HaYehudim, was the month of Adar. But of course, the Gemara tells us how foolish he was. He was happy because in that month, on the 7th, Moshe Rabbeinu died. But he didn't realize that on that month, Moshe Rabbeinu, also on the 7th of Adar, was born. In other words, there was that simcha in the month because Moshe Rabbeinu was born. And because there was the schus of the tzaddik, because there was the schus of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Purim story of Lahashmid Laharug La'abed couldn't happen. Asks the Chsam Sofer. Aaron Kohen Gadol died on Rosh Chodesh Av. We know that he was also born on Rosh Chodesh Av. Wie kann das sein? How could it be that the two B'nai Hamikdash were destroyed on the 9th of Av, the month of Aaron Kohen Gadol? If the schus of Moshe Rabbeinu was able to be made and saved in the month that he was born from the Purim story and Haman, then what about the schus of Aaron Kohen Gadol? Why isn't the schus of Aaron Kohen Gadol like that of Moshe Rabbeinu? There as a schus to be Megan for us in the month of Av. How could the B'nai Hamikdash have been destroyed in the month of Av if that's when Aaron Kohen Gadol was born? Especially the relationship with Aaron Kohen Gadol being the Kohen Gadol and the Avodah and the Beis Hamikdash. We can design. How could it be? Before we conclude, I'm begging and beseeching, open your hearts to the answer of the Chsam Sofer. It is the game changer. The Chsam Sofer tells us, when we say that the schus of Moshe Rabbeinu in the month of Adar saved us from Haman, why did the schus save us? Because we tapped into the midah. We tapped into the trait and attribute. We worked on the midah of Moshe. What was that? Zichru Torahs Moshe, the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us from Shemayim. In fact, we know in the Purim story it says, Kimu Masha Kiblu Kvar. We took upon ourselves 996 years later the Torah with Ahava. If you tap into the Torah, if you tap into the midah, the quality and the trait of Moshe, then and only then is the schus something that can save. But Aaron Kohen Gadol is Oyev Shalom and Roidev Shalom. And if we don't tap into that midah, if we don't pursue Shalom, then we can't have a right to evoke the schus of Aaron, and that could be the churban of the two Batei HaMikdash in his month, because we didn't tap into and utilize that midah. How does a person achieve shalom? Not with din, because if it's with din, a person will say, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. We have to learn to make shalom by going lifnim mishuras hadin. And that's what the Gemara means. The Beis Hamikdash and Yerushalayim was destroyed because we didn't go lifnim mishuras hadin. Had we learned the art of going lifnim mishuras hadin, it would have brought about oyev shalom v'roidev shalom. And if we bring about oyev shalom v'roidev shalom, then we have the schus that we tapped into Aaron. And then we're able to have that month, like the month of Adar for Moshe, the month of Av for Aaron Kohen Gadol. Yehi Ratzon, may it be the will of the Ribbono Shel Olam that we remove the darkness. Please, now is the time. Remove the darkness. Let's work specifically on interacting lifnim mishuras hadin. Lifnim mishuras hadin. It doesn't make a difference. I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. Go lifnim mishuras hadin. Be marbe shalom. By being oyev shalom v'roidev shalom, we then tap into the midah of Aaron. If we tap into the midah of Aaron Kohen Gadol, then we could ask for his schus to protect us in his month, the month of Av. And so that this year, Tisha B'Av Kara Lai Mayed. Mayed doesn't mean it was. Mayed doesn't mean it will be. Mayed means it is. Because we learned the art of removing the darkness, of going lifnim mishuras hadin, of tapping into shalom, and then the schus of Aaron could bring about the rebuilding of the third bias, b'mheira and b'yameinu. Amen.